Okay, well, welcome everybody. It's 1 o'clock now, and we are going to start our final meeting of CIRCASA, the EU project coordination of international research cooperation on soil carbon sequestration in agriculture. This webinar is organized around the viewpoint of looking back on what we have accomplished and looking forward on what we want to do after this project. So first of all, a little bit of technicality. As you know, the webinar is being recorded, so that we just want to remind you of that. You are all muted and your cameras are switched off. But if you have any comments on or questions, then please use the chat. If you have any technical issues, you can use the telephone number that is listed in the chat. Yes, so for now, I want to welcome all of you. We are very happy to see so many people interested in our conference. We had 364 registrations, of which out of many different countries, mostly out of Europe, but also from other parts of the world. So please feel welcome, and I'll give the floor now to Jean-François Susanna, who is the Vice President of the International Policy and French National Institute for Agriculture, Food and Environment, shortly INRAE, and also is the coordinator of the CIRCASA project. Please, Jean-François.
Thank you very much, Saskia, and really glad to welcome you all to this final conference organized online by the CIRCASA project. This project has received funding from the European Union Horizon 2020 Research and Innovation Program. CIRCASA is a coordination and support action which has created an international research cooperation on soil carbon sequestration in agriculture. We are glad to have today a large number of participants from a number of world regions, and this clearly shows the growing interest worldwide about soil carbon. CIRCASA has prepared an international research consortium on soil carbon, and you will hear during the meeting of expressions of interest of global regions, as well as commitments from both public and private sector stakeholders for such an international research consortium on soil carbon. But before this, we will hear about the policy and research context by distinguished speakers from the European Commission and from the Soil Health and Food Mission Board. I hand it back to you, Saskia, to introduce our first speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean-François. Yes, so we are going to start with the first block of our webinar. It is on the policy and research context. The first speaker is on Miss Nathalie Sauze van de Vijver. She is the Director of Quality, Research and Innovation and Outreach of the DG Agriculture and Rural Development of the European Commission. Please, Nathalie Sauze, have the floor.
Thank you, Saskia, and thank you, Jean-François. It's a great honor for me to be with you for this special event linked to CIRCASA project. Now, the project started exactly 4 years ago when we launched a call in 2017 in the framework of Horizon 2020 in the context of wider efforts to support climate commitments such as Paris Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals. So the topic aimed to increase our understanding about the role of agricultural soil to contribute to climate mitigation and adaptation, and also address the interaction between land use, land management, and soil carbon sequestration. And finally, a central element of this call was to bring together European and international expertise to develop a joint research agenda for soil carbon sequestration in agriculture. So now the aim of this call topic and the CIRCASA project are now really much more relevant than ever. You know, with the Green Deal just presented by the Commission more than 1 year ago, the EU set out to become the first climate neutral continent by 2050. And this goal is further specified in a number of strategies or legislation like the climate law, the climate pact, the climate adaptation strategy, and the forthcoming new soil strategy. So as you can imagine, meeting this ambition will be a major challenge and will require to coordinate action across the range of sector, territories, and disciplines. The Green Deal put farmers, foresters, and other land managers at the heart of the climate transition. And as you know, farmers and foresters alone manage about 85% of the EU territory. So now how can we support the farmer and the forester in their efforts to manage soils in such a way that they become major carbon sinks, while at the same time they have to be productive and to support other ecosystems. So at EU level, of course, we have the Common Agriculture Policy. We have proposed now new tools, new elements like the eco schemes. There is also carbon farming initiative under the Farm to Fork strategy. And that will be very important to use all these tools, and in particular for the member state when they are preparing their national strategic plan for the future CAP. But it's not enough because we are still facing important knowledge gaps that prevent us from implementing more effectively all these measures for climate smart soil management. And we will also need to better understand the potential trade-off between carbon sequestration and the other economic, environment, and social dimension of soil management. That's where CIRCASA project come into the picture. And throughout the last 4 years, CIRCASA partner have developed a strategic research agenda. We will have the opportunity to listen more today. And what is important and to see, it's a co-creation between stakeholders and international partners. And it's not only the needs of scientists, but also the needs from practice. And that is really important. And now the outcome of the CIRCASA project come indeed at very right moment when we are planning to implement under the next research program, Horizon Europe, a mission in the area of soil health and food. As you know, missions are new instruments that show that research innovation can deliver solutions to major societal problems. But it's not only research innovation. We will try to mobilize all the other instruments, and you will have the possibility, Kees Weerman will be one of the speakers now, to understand a little bit more about what they are proposing, what the mission board is proposing. A mission caring for soil is caring for life. And I would like to thank them, and also Jean-François Souzana, who is part of this mission board, for the very active manner they are dealing with this subject. So the mission, the idea is to have 75% of soil healthy by 2030, but there is also an international dimension. And we foresee international research cooperation, for example, in the area of soil monitoring. It's important to understand that this mission will not be implemented in isolation, but it's a mosaic of activities and policies. And I would like to mention the fact that the mission will support the development of the European Soil Observatory, and they will also contribute to the implementation of the new EU soil strategy will come later this year. And I would like to draw your attention that there is a public consultation just launched now on this soil strategy. So don't hesitate to participate. Now come back to CIRCASA. It's important the research roadmap developed by CIRCASA will provide really valuable contribution to this mission research agenda, but we have also to take other elements like the EGP soils. And the collaboration with international partner established through CIRCASA and the preparatory activities for this International Research Consortium will provide really a solid basis for the mission goal activities. And I would like to say that we fully support the launch of the NERC on soil carbon, and that we now exploring the opportunities under Horizon Europe to support its rollout. And I'm happy to see that there is a number of countries, international bodies, and private companies that they've expressed their interest to join the consortium. So I would like to thank all the partners of CIRCASA for their very hard work and their commitment, and in particular Jean-François, of course. And I'm sure that we'll learn a lot today with this event, and I wish you a successful collaboration on the ERC. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your nice contribution. We move now to the next speaker, who is Dr. Simon Kay. He is a senior expert at the European Commission at DG Climate Action. I am Saskia Keestra, your moderator for today. I also want to mention that we already are with 201 participants in the meeting. This is the first block that we are now in, which we are having a reflection from the policy and research context. Thank you. So now I would like to give the floor to Dr. Simon Kay.
Okay, thank you very much for that little introduction, Saskia, and thank you very much also to Jean-François for the invitation to give a little bit of context. It's a very important time for climate and linking to research agenda just at this moment. There's a stepping up of Europe's 2030 climate ambition, and there's a very important response needed from agriculture and land. Maybe just to the next slide. And to give a short background, in a little bit less than a year ago, already mentioned by Nathalie, the Commission came forward with a climate law proposal, which is basically taking the Paris Agreement pathway to climate neutrality by 2050 and putting it into European law. That's still undergoing negotiation, but the principle, I think, is very clear there, of finding a way to achieve neutrality by 2050. And therefore, the Commission is now going through a revision, if you like, of the 2030 targets that we already have in place, but to move those to be more ambitious, to fit them on the trajectory, on the pathway to the 2050 goal of net zero by 2050. Now, the very important change is the framing of removals, including those on land, land use, soil, agriculture, and these are now very much incorporated into the metric. I won't go into more detail than that. Maybe next slide, please. But just to say that it's very integrated now into the target, whereas before LULUCF, land use change in forestry, was a little bit of a bolted on element to the policy. But now we want to know internally, we're looking at how do we set ambitious, credible targets for land use change, forestry, and agriculture. So the soil part is in LULUCF, and how to bring better action, incentives to farmers and foresters, and if you like, create a better activity or business model for them. And my last slide, which I'll spend a little bit more time to go through. So here's a kind of overview, and looking through the general overview of the CIRCASA project and looking at the pillars and the strategic agenda. So of course, all those elements are of interest when we look at climate in terms of what soils can contribute, particularly from the carbon sequestration perspective. But I wanted to pick one out, and that's really the MRV issue, the pillar 2. The soil carbon monitoring, reporting, verification. I think this has also international significance. This is not really an issue or a context related to only the EU, but in the EU, what are we looking at? Well, we're looking at really how we have strategies which we could say are sort of production oriented. So what do we do with our land? How do we produce food, farm to fork? How do we look after the environment, biodiversity? What do we do with our forests? And how do we manage our land in general for carbon sink? And those are on the left-hand side. And on the right we have a whole series of actions that are linked to climate. So the renovation wave means starting to use biomaterials. This links to construction, circular economy, of course, bioeconomy, energy efficiency, what we do with energy. And these need to somehow connect together with production-oriented strategies. Now, if we focused on the soil part of it, which is what CIRCASA obviously does, it's really how we do things. We've called it, this term, it's a very loose term at the moment, of carbon farming, where we would bring together what actors on the land do to deliver output for the strategies on the right-hand side, if you like. But the essential point here is how we're able to measure and direct the right strategy, the right measures to deliver on that. So we know that MRV is still the Achilles heel of soil, but we see it as a very important stepping stone in the next decade to get to the point where action can be really leveraged on land and on soils to be able to help in this very complex network of actions that need to be taken for the 2030 and 2050 targets. So our perspective on this type of project is it's very key. Already Natalie has explained that the links to the overall research programs, and I think we can only support that, and also how we can outreach to the international context and make sure that indeed there's the best benefits can be taken of the scientific learning in the different corporations of international topics and subjects and projects like this one. Okay, thank you very much. Back to you, Saskia.
Many thanks for your nice contribution. We would now like to continue with the next speaker, Dr. Kees Veerman, who is the chair of the Mission Board Soil Health and Food. Please, Kees, take the floor.
Okay, here we are. Well, thank you, Saskia, and thank you, Jean-Francois, for the invitation. As Mrs. van der Weijden already said, caring for soil is caring for life. That's the title of our mission. And the mission board is very active to fulfill that promise. But the mission goal, as already mentioned, is 75% of soils are healthy by 2030. Quite an ambitious project. And these soils should be able to provide essential ecosystem services, such as the provision of food and other biomass, supporting biodiversity, storing and regulating the flow of water, or mitigating the effects of climate change. And the target corresponds to 100% increase of healthy soils against the current baseline. And that's again, ambitious. Our interim report, which was handed to the Commissioner Gabriel last September, sets out the vision and the blueprint to reach this ambition through a combination of research and innovation, and also training and advice, as well as the demonstration of good practices for soil management using living labs and lighthouses. To be successful, the mission will also improve the monitoring of soil health and the pressures acting on them, and mobilize investment and encourage changes in policies. The mission will be a joint endeavor by researchers, policymakers, stakeholders like farmers, foresters, city greeners. So bringing science, innovation, and practice into closer contact, and to engage consumers and citizens at large to participate. And essential will be the way how to reward the ecosystem services. Without feasible business models for stakeholders, things are not going to move. In this way, it will be possible to put Europe on a path towards sustainable land and soil management as part of a wider green societal transition. Soil carbon is one of the key indicators of soil health. A survey carried out by the Mission Secretariat showed that EU citizens increasingly acknowledge the contribution of soils for mitigating of climate change. Indeed, the role of soils climate change mitigation and adaptation is major, and the mission board recommends to conserve soil carbon stocks where they are high, as in forests and in peatlands, and to increase stocks where they are initially low, as in most croplands in the EU. Quite a logical point of attach. It's remarkable to see that within the CIRCASA project, a consensus was reached across contrasted world regions and among diverse stakeholders, and how to bridge knowledge gaps and co-design innovation with farmers for soil carbon. The strategic research agenda of CIRCASA forms a useful input for the next stage of the mission. We will address research and innovation priorities and implementation in this mission. Indeed, land degradation and loss of soil carbon is a global issue, and this needs to be increasingly tackled through international cooperation. And I'm glad to see the emergence of an International Research Consortium on this issue, since it will bring the critical mass that is needed to overcome roadblocks in further understanding soil processes and monitoring soil carbon balance and co-designing innovation that is truly used and shared by farmers worldwide. It's also important to note that the Research Consortium will contribute to land use change. For instance, the loss of soil carbon created by deforestation, and also contribute to the development of nature-based solutions, aiming at preventing and restoring soil carbon in forests, peatlands, and natural ecosystems. So let's join forces across countries, bringing together academia, private sector, land managers, and NGOs, and let's further develop research and innovation on soil carbon and soil health. Doing things together, we will succeed. And therefore, in view of this imposing assignment, we should be aware of the fact that only by cooperation we can proceed. And the essential consequence that we should realize ourselves of all our work on soil is essential for all life. So the purpose of our mission is highly relevant for all parts of life in all its forms. And it also, the soil mission has also direct relations and consequences at the other missions: cancer, water, climate change, cities. Once again, our mission statement, therefore, caring for soil is caring for life, is spot on. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I do wish you a conference and this project becoming a great success. We really need all able hands and fine minds together to meet and help solving the huge assignment ahead of us. So let's cooperate. Let's do our very best. Thank you for your attention.
Many thanks, Kees. This was very inspiring. I just want to welcome the last people that joined us in this first block that was on policy and research context. The rest of the agenda is now on the screen, and you can see that the next block that we are going to address is an overview of what we did in the CIRCASA project. Then after that, there will be an expression of interest from different regions over the whole globe. And then the next block is on the governance and funding of the future IRC. Then there is a set of statements from a range of different stakeholders in their relations to the future IRC. And we end with a Q&A. For the Q&A, I also wish to thank the first three speakers of today for being in time, because our time schedule is very tight. And I hope that they will remain with us until the Q&A, so that if you have any questions, please post them in the chat, either whether they are for the people that you just heard their speeches or for any of the other speakers that will come after this. So, so now we move to the next block, which is on the CIRCASA project. So looking backwards, general overview of the strategic research agenda in the IRC. So the first speaker will be, again, Jean-François Susanna, who you've already seen before. So Jean-François, please have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Saskia. And I will introduce our CIRCASA project with contributions also from Pete Smith and from Anna Freli Larsen. So let me start by saying that when we look backwards, we had this project developing on agricultural soil carbon. And I can provide now the project overview. Let me start by placing CIRCASA in context. The context is that we have a large interest on agricultural soil carbon, both at global and EU scales. We will hear a bit later today about the RegSoil project, Recarbonizing Soils, that has been launched by FAO, which is a very ambitious project of global dimensions on agricultural soil carbon. There are different policy frameworks on soil carbon. For instance, the UNFCCC Convention on Climate Change has organized the Cornivia workshop on soil carbon, where negotiators, stakeholders, and scientists could exchange their views and propose some options that could be foundations of policies. In the same way, the United Nations Conventions to Combat Desertification is looking into soil carbon as a key criterion for the land degradation neutrality principle that many countries, including the European Union, have adopted. We now see a number of private sector initiatives, for instance, those linked to regenerative agriculture. And we see the development of certification schemes by private sector for agricultural soil carbon, but also interest of countries that develop national low carbon labels. And this is happening in France. I know it's happening in other countries. We have just heard from Kees, and I really would like to thank Kees again for his inspiring talk, that the European Union is launching this mission to restore the health of soils and therefore to restore the soil organic carbon stocks. And this can contribute to several of the EU Green Deal strategies, as we have heard from Nathalie Soos and from Simon Kay. And this is not only in Europe, it is also a key contribution to the Sustainable Development Goals. We have large efforts in Europe in research, and we collaborate with a number of projects, such as the European Joint Programme on Soils, which has a lot of means and efforts to work on soil health and on soil carbon. So the CIRCASA project has been developed with 22 partners from 17 countries. We have most world regions, and we are working with the research secretariats of initiatives such as the 4/1000 initiative, which is on soils for climate and food security, the Global Research Alliance on Agricultural Greenhouse Gases. We will hear from those two initiatives later in today. We also collaborate with the Joint Programming Initiative on Agriculture and Climate Change in Europe that gathers more than 20 countries, and with the Global Soil Partnership that will be introduced later by Ronald Vargas. So this project is aiming at developing international synergies concerning research and knowledge exchange on carbon sequestration in agriculture. We see that with all those partners and with the several initiatives, we have outreach to most world regions as shown on the map with the colors highlighted. So what we have done with that coordination and support action is review the scientific and technical evidence, working with a large community of scientists from several disciplines. And we have also studied quite extensively in several world regions stakeholders' views on solutions, barriers, knowledge, and research needs. And those inputs came together in the co-design of a strategic research agenda, which we have extensively discussed with our partners over the continents. And we think that that agenda, plus the commitments we now see from many stakeholders and scientists, will greatly facilitate the establishment of an international research consortium. So let me now hand it to Pete Smith. Pete is a professor at Aberdeen University and really one thought leader for the soil community and the soil carbon community. To you, Pete.
Thank you very much, Jean-Francois. So the first thing we did was to review the scientific and technical evidence, and we surveyed the community, soil scientists, those involved in agricultural practice, soil and land management, and soil and land management researchers. And we asked them to tell us what were the main uncertainties and gaps in the processes, in the management and monitoring of soils, and the barriers to implementation. We got a fairly really good responses from across the board. I think overall we had a poorer representation from the social science disciplines, but when we looked across the disciplines, most were in natural, biological, physical sciences, but a bit less on the social science. And I think the social science is a bit of a gap that could be filled in the future. We categorized the responses of what people saw as the main research challenges into three themes. One revolving around the processes, so that was stabilization of soil carbon, saturation, the role of microorganisms, and soil organic carbon and greenhouse gases. Within theme 2, those were related to the management and monitoring of soil carbon, so implementing it in the field and demonstrating that it's possible. And the issues that came up there were deep soil stabilization, MRV, monitoring and measuring, and that's come up already before, and we recognize that as a significant issue where we can make a valuable contribution. Vegetation management, organic amendment management, and mixed agricultural practices. And in the third theme, these can be focused around the barriers. So what's preventing, how do we prevent soil organic carbon loss? What are the economic barriers? What are the socio-cultural barriers to implementing practices that would lead to soil organic carbon change? The institutional and legal barriers, and the technological readiness. So we gathered some excellent information from this survey, which we were able to form into these two themes and examine in a bit more detail. Next slide, please. The second part of the analysis was to see where the research gaps are and within the CIRCASA themes. So along those themes which I just outlined, we wanted to identify the networks that are already out there doing this research and the expertise that we have within CIRCASA and outside CIRCASA, so that as we move forward to an International Research Consortium, we can aim to fill some of these gaps. We reviewed over 14,000 journal articles, and this map here shows the major institutions that are involved in publishing those soil science papers. So these are soil organic carbon related to greenhouse gases and carbon sequestration. There were over 14,000 papers, and as you can see, a number of the CIRCASA team are involved in this, but there's also a range of activity going on around the world which couldn't be captured entirely by CIRCASA. The other thing that was worth noting was there was very little or limited number of publications related to our four themes. So this suggests that there's still a lot of work to do in relating the work that's ongoing to the themes that came out as the most important. So it really identified that there are gaps that need filling in that research agenda. For example, only 9.4% of papers were on soil processes, 8.7% on monitoring, 8% on soil management, and only 2.4% were concerning barriers. So as we know, the barriers are the main thing that prevent management practices from changing. And there's very little research going on in this area. And I think that was also borne out by the fact that we had so few social science respondents. So this is an area that we need to increase capacity in the future. Next slide, please. This slide just shows an analysis using two models, the global EPIC model to estimate residue inputs and the Rothsey model to estimate changes in soil organic carbon decomposition, just to look at where we would get a net benefit or a net negative by trying to reach the 4 per mil aspirational target in global croplands. This can't be taken as the final results because decomposition, we know that decomposition may have been overestimated in some hot and tropical environments. But what this preliminary findings show us is that in the temperate regions, the northern temperate regions and the southern temperate regions, we tend to get a soil carbon gain from implementing change, but we could have some problems in the tropical and subtropical regions with meeting those targets of the 4 per mil. And there's more work to be done, obviously, in this area. Next slide, please. And the last thing that I'll show is just the where we've taken a review of how cost effective these soil carbon management practices are. This is an estimate of the cost of converting conventional tillage to no tillage, and these are dollars per hectare, 2010 dollars, just for comparison. And you can see here that in blue we have a positive cost, so it costs money to implement the change, and where you see red, you actually save money by implementing the change. So this shows that there is a significant regional difference in the cost effectiveness of implementing this practice. And if you compare the top panel, which is for corn, and the bottom panel, which is for wheat, it also shows that there are differences in the cost effectiveness between different crops by implementing the same management practice. So again, it throws up some questions and gives us important global questions that we can try to address in the IRC. I'd like to hand over now, so please move on to the next slide.
Yeah, thank you very much, Pete. And I hand it over to Anna. As you have seen from this review by Pete, we have made progress on state of the art for some of the findings on costing the changes and understanding the potential. And we have made also significant advances in terms of understanding what are the research gaps. But moreover, we did surveys of the needs by stakeholders, and this is exactly what you have been coordinating, Anna. So I hand it to Anna Freli-Larsen from Ecologic Institute. Thank you, Anna.
Thanks very much, Jean-François. Yes, so in CIRCASA, we carried out a stakeholder consultation, which included an online survey in 7 different languages, where we received nearly 1,400 responses from a diversity of stakeholders. And Aarhus University in Denmark also administered a separate survey with farmers, a large representative sample of farmers in Denmark. In addition to that, our regional CIRCASA partners organized 10 workshops with over 230 participants in total across the different regions. The consultation asked about perceptions around soil organic carbon, ecosystem services delivered by it, about barriers and solutions to upscaling improved management, and in addition on knowledge needs. We asked about views about the knowledge needed by farmers and other stakeholders, about knowledge that is available but not accessible to different stakeholder groups, as well as what new research is needed. And the messages emerging from the surveys and the workshops are very complementary and reinforce each other. Next, please. A central message from the consultation is that stakeholders perceive lack of accessible knowledge to be a key barrier to scaling up beneficial practices. When we were asking about knowledge needs, we had open-ended questions, and when to process the responses, we coded these into different themes. And the main knowledge gaps relate to farm level management, to economics, policy solutions, and MRV. But it's important to note that 24% of the responses that we received pointed to the need to improve sharing and availability of existing knowledge, so improve knowledge transfer and exchange. So this underlines the importance of both new research and making sure that existing and new research is made available to stakeholders. Next, please. Looking specifically at where research needs are from stakeholders' perspective, we found that for farmers and farm advisors, the emphasized gaps relate to better understanding of costs and benefits of SOC management practices in terms of productivity, yields, water holding capacity, as well as financial returns, net income impacts at farm level, or any other benefits such as soil workability. But also that farmers and farm advisors need to know better what the risks and trade-offs are in moving towards improved soil carbon management, as well as what time and effort is involved. So that both short-term and long-term dimensions of impacts and management are needed. In other words, farmers want to know what's in it for them and what the risks are. And farmers also need to have concrete guidance on how to manage their crop rotations, how to combine and sequence practices. And many pointed also to the need to better understand the role that soil biology and microorganisms play in relation to SOC and soil health. For other stakeholders, this includes policymakers, civil society, private sector. The main research needs relate to better understanding of societal and environmental benefits in different contexts. Also how to design different policy mechanisms to better incentivize SOC management, what their effectiveness is in terms of return on public investments, or where to, and specifically where to target and how to tailor specific policy actions and how to design the policy mix that gives the best impact. As was already mentioned by Simon Kay, reliability and standardization of MRV at a reasonable cost was also something that came up particularly from the policymakers. And whereas remote sensing and sort of these large data approaches were emphasized, there was also a lot of sort of messages around the importance of using existing farm level sampling and crowdsourcing of data, so combining the top-down and bottom-up approaches. And importantly, there was also a need raised around the question of how broader sustainability transition in agri-food systems can drive improved SOC management. Next slide, please. In addition to the content of new research, the consultation also pointed to the need to be really strategic about how we do research. So specifically how we identify knowledge needs, how knowledge is created, exchanged, and made available. And to make research really effective as a trigger for scaling up improved SOC management, there's 4 points that we need to really consider. One is that we need continuous alignment of research with knowledge needs, and we need a balanced approach across the different topics, themes, as well as disciplines. So Pete already pointed to the need to also bring in more social science knowledge and research on board. In addition, we need to make sure that research delivers context-specific and place-based knowledge and produces tailored guidance for stakeholders. Participatory co-creation of knowledge would ensure that knowledge that is delivered is usable and useful for different stakeholders. And as I mentioned earlier already, it's important that we make sure that existing and newly created knowledge is also made accessible, and that these principles should really be brought in from the planning to the carry out to the dissemination aspects of the research process. Thank you, and back to you, Jean-François.
Thank you very much, Anna. I think we see how important it is to understand the views from the stakeholders. So it's my privilege to introduce now our strategic research agenda. And this agenda is supporting the creation of an international research consortium. It has 4 pillars. First one is about frontiers research. How could we unlock the potential of soil carbon? And we will see here, we would like to organize research schools, international research schools. The second pillar is about the soil carbon stock change. How can we assess those changes, monitor, report, and verify? We would like to create an international standard there. And we think international innovation projects can be game changers. In the third pillar, we have agroecological and technological innovations. This requires private-public innovation projects. And in pillar 4, we would like to create an enabling environment and co-create knowledge through regional networks and also through open online collaborative platforms. So let me start with pillar 1, which is on frontiers research. Here, as Pete mentioned, we see several issues: the deep soil carbon dynamics, the soil biodiversity. How could we overcome the trade-off between storing carbon in soils and emitting more nitrous oxide? How can we stabilize soil organic carbon in the soil? And can we even have more soil carbon in the soil despite some saturation effects? And moreover, how could we climate-proof soil carbon sequestration? Is soil carbon sequestration threatened by climate change? And can we overcome this? So to work on those important issues, we definitely need to work together with national research agencies across world regions, with research organizations and universities. How could we do this? This is through research schools based on shared research priorities, with each agency paying for national research teams and an international review panel with observers from each agency. These international research schools would be open to private sector, and we foresee that the second external call of the EJP Soil in 2022 will be the opportunity to develop an international dimension, bringing in that call some agencies from several world regions. But we will also explore other opportunities to create international research goals. The second pillar is about monitoring, reporting, and verifying soil organic carbon stock changes. Here is a sort of overview of all the types of data that need to come together in such a monitoring, reporting, verifying scheme in order to make an international standard that could be further used and further improved by countries for their national inventories, but also by corporates or businesses, startups, to develop tailor-made solutions. So if I go through this slide, you see that first we have long-term experiments at benchmark sites. We need to bring together all those data we have started in CIRCASA. We have short-term experiments where typically CO2 fluxes are measured. Then we need to bring in the modeling of the soil organic carbon, of the other greenhouse gases. And obviously to drive the models, we need spatial data on climate, soils, land cover, but also farm activity data or other land management activity data. And then we can bring in also remote sensing to verify the activity data, but also as inputs to run models. And we know of the very rapid progress in the monitoring of the surface soil carbon organic content, and also in the vegetation activity. So we can actually model also from remote sensing of photosynthesis, for instance, the input of carbon into biomass and therefore into soils when the agricultural activities are known. And obviously to verify, you need to resample and to have ground truthing of the soil organic carbon changes. And this can be organized certainly in complementarity with all the efforts that are deployed in countries, but also internationally through the Global Soil Partnership and through the Soil Observatory in Europe. combining those informations will be key to derive soil organic change over time. So in that pillar 2, to create an international MRV standard, we look into international projects working with the soil community, AJP Soil in Europe, Global Soil Partnerships, EU Soil Observatory, and bringing in the strengths of remote sensing through space and innovation agencies. We have a large Copernicus program in Europe for remote sensing. We have GEOS internationally, European Space Agency, the NASA Harvest is willing to collaborate. We also see that we have some communities with infrastructures like the International Carbon Observatory System, ICOS, and some meta-analysis of long-term field experiments. We also have some projects which are dedicated to the monitoring of agricultural activities like the NEVA project in Europe. We foresee a design study. We have started that design study, and we can see already that additional carbon storage from changes in activities like having some cover crops, it would be possible with that scheme to get an accuracy of about 30% of the stock change after 3 to 5 years. After creating that design study that needs to be international to bring in all the key players, we would like to develop 2 implementation stages, a sort of a rough implementation and then a more detailed implementation. This will require a private-public consortium. So we will have a soil carbon pillar here, a vegetation remote sensing pillar, activity data pillar, modeling pillar, and a verification pillar. This will start with creating a consortium in 2021, creating the work plan, and starting with the launch of the IRC. It is maybe interesting to note that we already have a proxy, which is a change in annual duration of vegetation cover in global croplands, and we were able to get some funding to develop that proxy, and it will be soon available. With pillar 3, it's quite different. It's really looking into what sort of options can we bring in. And remember, CIRCASA was an agricultural soil carbon, so this slide needs to be expanded to consider other land use types like forestry or even conservation of ecosystems. But here we're dealing with agriculture. So if you like to have more options for farmers, you need to have technological innovations like having crops which are more deep-rooted crops, which may be perennials, so have more vegetation duration to bring in more carbon into the soil. And this requires to work with some breeding companies. Then you have a role of precision and digital agriculture for soil carbon. It is clear that if you do improve the way you manage the crops, you may bring in some more soil carbon. For instance, you may optimize your inputs. In the same way, you have circular agriculture. How can we recycle through compost, through organic fertilizers? There is also a role of the bioenergy sector, the digestates from the biogas or the biochar. These are ways to improve the soil carbon while producing some energy, and this attracts a lot of attention also. Key to this, certainly not least, is the role of biodiversity, of agroecological changes in cropping systems, in farming systems for soil carbon. We have a clear understanding that if we want to have more soil carbon, we need some changes that are systemic changes in the way the agricultural systems are performed. So to do all this, we need to create public-private partnerships by subtopic with the plant breeding sector, with people working in digital agriculture, precision agriculture, certainly with the agri-food corporates or businesses, with organic waste and bioenergy sectors. So we foresee that this could become a portfolio of projects by topics with a pre-competitive innovation. We will seek engagement. We have started to do so, have a design stage for each subtopic, and a pipeline of innovation projects. Then pillar 4, as well explained by Anna, is crucial because you can have the best technology in the world, you can have the best MRV system, and you can have excellent science. It will not work unless you really can create knowledge with farmers. Sorry, there is a typo in the slide. You can have knowledge co-creation, sharing knowledge from local and regional experimentation, co-creating this knowledge with regional networks, testing and assessing scaling out mechanisms. So how can you move from a pioneer experiment to something that becomes mainstream? That is a critical issue. And you need also to have added value for farmers, added value for the industries to make this a mainstream. And you also need to assess the co-benefits and trade-offs for other key challenges like climate change adaptation, food security, water, and so on. So to do this, we would like to have an online knowledge platform. I will show in the next slide the CIRCASA open collaborative platform. We would like to upgrade it also together with European Joint Programme on Soils. And we would like to bring that knowledge to the farmers, quite possibly like an app on their mobile that will show what is possible with their farm, what is possible with their soils, and how could more carbon be stored. So crowdsourcing knowledge through platforms, having regional networks, working in the local languages, trying to understand and be aware of the cultural diversity will be crucial to, let's say, downscale and work in a collaborative way with our stakeholders. So here again, we are seeking engagement this year. We will have a design stage and a pipeline of regional knowledge co-creation projects. And here I show our open collaborative platform services that range from matchmaking, so it's like a social media, knowledge sharing, information system with data and maps. So here on the top right, you have just an example with the profiles and the activities, projects of scientists and also extension services working here in Southern Africa and Indian Ocean, in Madagascar, for instance, and teaming together to make some efforts on soil carbon. It's quite clear that if we want to work as an international community, we want to build up that community and have people knowing each other and exchanging best practices, exchanging knowledge. To facilitate this, and that's on the bottom of the slide at the right, you need some data. And this platform brings and harvests, in fact, the data from the best sources worldwide and also in Europe. And here is a product that has been developed by ISRIC, the International Soil Research and Information Institute, which has developed within CIRCASA the Soil Grids project, which is a fantastic tool at a 250-meter resolution. And here you show an example of a detailed map of soil organic carbon stocks. And it's showing this in India, in the region of Mumbai. Just as an example, it's a global product. So we are quite convinced that by working in this way, we can create this International Research Consortium on soil carbon can be a game changer and can greatly facilitate the transitions in land management and having a key role of land management, land use for climate challenges, for food security, for climate adaptation, biodiversity, and water. So thank you. I think I will stop there. Back to you, Saskia.
Oh, sorry, on the video, I am now in the computer of Peter Kuipman because I had some problem. I have the video on. No, I am not. A little stressful moment here. I was. I'm very happy that you are so well in time. Thank you for this wonderful overview of what we've done in the last 4 years in CIRCASA. Because we are well in time, I would like to address one question that came in the chat. I know that there were multiple questions in it, and we will hope to be able to answer them later on in the Q&A, but because we have some time, there was one question that we picked out, which I would like to ask Jean-François to answer. And that was whether we include the soil functions and biodiversity in the future, and whether we include also other greenhouse gases.
Thank you. That's a very relevant question. Yes, we need to do this. We need to do this because biodiversity is clearly a driver at multiple scales, from the landscape scale to the soil aggregate scale. It is a driver of the processes in soils and in the carbon dynamics of soils. So we have included this in our research agenda, both in terms of frontiers research. I think it's a fantastic research area, still a lot to be learned about, but it is also an area for farm management and for other land managers, developing some diagnostic and prognostic tools on the soil biodiversity, on the soil biology, can be greatly helpful to manage the carbon dynamics. And quite obviously, and I think I have already addressed this a bit, we do not see any possibility of working on the soil carbon balance without looking at other trace gases, especially greenhouse gases. This is only relevant, and MRV of soil carbon is only relevant if you place it in a much broader context of the greenhouse gas balance of a farm or a landscape. So this is clearly part of our agenda, but quite obviously we cannot cover everything into the same detail. So our focus is on soil carbon, and we try to have some strong relationships with those areas of biodiversity and greenhouse gases. Thank you, Saskia.
Thank you very much for this clear answer. The other questions we will come back to in the Q&A session at the end of our webinar. So now we will continue with the next block of the conference, which is on the expressions of interest of different global regions. And the first speaker will be Professor Tantali Razafimbelo, and who is a soil science professor at the Antananarivo University in Madagascar. Sorry for mismatching your name. Okay, please have the floor.
Thank you, Saskia, for giving the opportunity to Africa to express its interest for the IRC. So what I'm going to present to you is a result of a discussion between...
Is it possible for you to speak a little bit louder?
Is it okay like this?
No, it's better. Thank you.
Okay. So what I'm going to present to you is a result of a discussion between 3 research institutions working in Africa as IRD, CIRAD, and the University of Antananarivo on behalf of the CASA network in Africa. So for the pillars 1 and 2 mentioned by Jean-François, in the framework of NDCs and national communications, but also in order to increase data and information on soil organic carbon in Africa, the IRC will provide a network which allow support for African scientists for specific research, for data acquirement, taking account of the diversity in Africa, and also for data quality improvement. Also capacity building on soil organic carbon and greenhouse gas MRV, and support for the construction of shared databases in Africa. And for the pillars 3 and 4, in view of the soil degradation in Africa region, the IRC will allow an exchange of experiences and techniques on the implementation of appropriate innovations to reduce soil organic carbon loss and to restore soil organic carbon in depleted soils in Africa. We have also found that for the Africa region, the region can be considered as one hub inside the IRC to facilitate the management in terms of funds, administrative ways, and with a possibility to undertake some sub-hub if necessary. The lead institution for the region should be an international institution working in Africa, which is involved in many countries, in African countries, including Madagascar. An international institution which has a strong research anchoring and linked with the research college of the 4 initiatives and Global initiative. And the last important one, it has to be a voluntary institution. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We move on to the next speaker, who is from China, Professor Hongmin Dong, who is the Deputy Director General and Professor at the Institute of Environment and Sustainable Development in Agriculture, of the Chinese Academy of Agricultural Sciences.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. This is Dong Hongmin from Chinese Academy of Agricultural Sciences. Thank you for this good opportunity. We are interested in the Pillar 3, which is fostering innovation and upskilling through public-private cooperation. For the key challenges related to soil carbon in our range is difficulty to scale up current technology because small household dominated agriculture production system, average crop area is less than 0.3 hectare per household in China. We expected the innovation could provide solutions and the global network and IRCs could share knowledge and practice to promote soil carbon sequestration, improve soil health, and ensure food safety and farmers' benefit. We can learn the experience and mechanism to incentive private sector to invest nature positive agriculture production system. We are willing to enhance cooperation with all the stakeholders, make full use of this global network, promoting green agriculture development, contribute to the realization of sustainable development goal. We wish you every success. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Dong. We continue with Professor Beata Meoca Madari from South America, specifically from Brazil. She's a research scientist at the Brazilian Agricultural Research Corporation and a professor in agronomy at the Federal University of Goiás in Brazil.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm Beata Madari from Embrapa. In Brazil and in our greater region, Latin America, there has been important developments in conservation agriculture, which includes soil carbon accumulation and stabilization. Although further research is necessary to bring sub-region and system-specific solutions to all farm sizes and business models. It is vitally important to increase and multiply efforts in technology and knowledge transfer and to co-create knowledge and technology together with farmers, industries, businesses, and even with policymakers and possible funders. We need to learn more about the drivers in the decision-making of stakeholders and how they could be stimulated and what they need, what are their barriers to adopt sustainable management systems and technologies. In this context, I also have to mention the importance of soil carbon monitoring, reporting, and verification as a tool to study and monitor the effectiveness of actions, but also to incentivize stakeholders. Well, in general, it is still very important to keep working to raise awareness about the importance of soil organic carbon and conservation agriculture for sustainability of natural and agroecosystems at all levels, economic, social, and environmental. In terms of the importance and possible functions of the IRC for soil carbon in agriculture and related sectors in our region, we think that it could be extremely relevant and we are interested in participating in its development. A global research network with active regional hub among several attributions should support and make incentives for regional and sub-regional collaboration, as well as enhance global insertion. It should help identify regional and sub-regional specific issues, priorities, and challenges, both in research and policy. It should help set up networks to support information flow of existing solutions and to solve problems, and also to help institutional collaboration within and among countries. Embrapa has more than 40 specialized research centers dealing with virtually all aspects of agriculture. So to some extent, we should be able to contribute to the 4 pillars of the research consortium. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Beate. Now we continue with the next speaker, who is from Russia, Professor Pavel Krasilnikov. Sorry. He is a professor at the Faculty of Soil Science at the Moscow State University.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Speaking on behalf of Moscow, the Moscow State University, the Faculty of Soil Science, I should confirm our deep interest in their participation in the project. We are, in fact, interested in participation in all the pillars, but the first pillar is of major importance for us as for the leading scientific and educational institution in Russia. Our main challenge is to bring the information to our decision makers, to the government officials. The thing is that Russia definitely is very much motivated to participate in all the activities aimed at greenhouse emission reduction and in carbon sequestration and so on. But unfortunately, the priority for our Ministry of Environment is the sequestration of carbon in the forests. And the Ministry of Agriculture even doesn't recognize the importance of soil in carbon sequestration activities. And that's why we need a very strong and solid scientific base to prove and to bring this information to the decision makers and to all the stakeholders. Thus, when we can approach both the government and other players, including farmers, non-governmental organizations, in this case, we can improve the management of soils and to move our land users to the path of carbon sequestration in soils used in agriculture. I think that international cooperation within the frames of the planned International Research Consortium will benefit our efforts, and from our side we will do our best also to make a good feedback from our team working on this important issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this nice contribution from Russia. Then we now move more south to Australia. Dr. Ben McDonald from the CSIRO. He is the group leader of Soil Process and Function Group in the CSIRO. Please have the floor.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Bennett McDonald. I'm the leader of the Soils and Landscape Group at the Commonwealth Science and Industrial Research Organisation, CSIRO in Australia. The ability to measure the terrestrial carbon cycle at a range of scales is a key challenge for the Pacific region. The region has many different landscapes and agroecosystems, ranging from the Pacific Island atolls and volcanic islands, to the New Zealand Alps, to the Papua New Guinea highlands, and to the flat and ancient soil landscapes of Australia. The International Research Consortium will help develop the measurement and modelling capabilities and technologies that will enable the quantification of the terrestrial soil carbon cycle across these diverse landscapes and agroecosystems. Most importantly, the IRC will assist in the development of human capacity to undertake this activity, as well as land management options to sequester carbon into the soil. We are looking forward to participating in the IRC and collaborating on this important challenge. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for all of you, also specifically for keeping the time. So we are well on our schedule. The next thing up on our agenda is a short polling. So I would like to ask, I think Chiara, to put up the poll, the first poll. Okay, please, you can fill in these questions. You get a couple of minutes to do that, and then we will come back to see how our community that we have gathered here is working on this.
see the participant screen.
Yeah, if you have completed your poll, then the poll dialogue screen will disappear. But we wait until everybody has contributed to it, because we have at the moment 230 participants in our meeting. And then we will get the results on the screen. Look, well, this are the results of our poll. So you can see that almost everybody is foreseeing to work on soil organic carbon issues in the future. Then a large proportion of the people would actually like to participate actively in our IRC. This is what we're very happy to see that. And nobody here is not interested in it at all. Then finally, we see quite good distribution between the different pillars that you are interested in. So we'll come back to you on these issues later on. Okay, I was also, we should not, well, okay, I will just continue to the next block. The next block will be about the governance and funding of the IRC, which will be explained to you by Jean-François Susanna. Please, I have the floor. Jean-François is not here yet, but...
Okay, sorry, I had some problems with the controls. Here we are. So thank you, Saskia. And it is the opportunity for me to explain how we see the governance and the funding of this International Research Consortium. We are really happy to have so many participants that are interested. And in fact, it was a very good surprise to see from the poll that there is a balanced interest for the 4 pillars. So this is really great, because this means that we are possibly on the spot for this IRC. So just to remind you, we have prepared this IRC because we believe it will bring large benefits to stakeholders, both in the European Union, but also in the other world regions. And this will be through international research and innovation cooperation. So we would like to align those activities to create breakthroughs, avoid duplication, and develop innovation on a large scale. We believe no single country, no single corporate can be with a critical mass to develop alone those activities at scale. And what we will bring is that critical mass. So as was shown already through our SRA, through the mission and other activities, we need to work in a highly interdisciplinary way and to be guided by stakeholders' demands. So this is really, these are really principles for the IRC. And this requires a dedicated tool to carry out ambitious international research and innovation programs. So the vision we have is that we will build up on the strategic research agenda with the 4 pillars: frontier science, monitoring, reporting, and verification, agroecological and technological innovations, enabling environment and knowledge co-creation, which is pillar 4. So we will develop the research and innovation activities through a portfolio of projects, of programs that we will try to best coordinate, both across regions, but also across pillars. And this implies to share and develop collaborative knowledge, to have capacity building, especially in some world regions where there is least knowledge, to create coordination across institutions, organizations, and to have therefore some governance. There are many categories of organizations that could contribute. First, obviously, research. So we have universities, we have national and international research organizations that are the key players. Then we have a large number of private sector organizations, the corporates, SMEs, startups in different sectors. Could be agri-food, could be organic fertilizer, machinery, could be plant breeding. We have consultancies, extension services working with farmers and other land managers. We may have associations of farmers, foresters, landowners, and so on. Certainly there is interest of NGOs, of foundations to support those transitions towards agroecology and nature-based solutions. And we know the financial sector is in fact very involved in those changes because it affects the price of land, so it affects really the way the soil capital is invested. So the public sector, as we have heard from the European Commission, is deeply involved in this transformation towards greening the society. This involves the research agencies, the development and environment agencies, the space agencies, but also when we think about the role of international organizations, the UN system, especially international partnerships and initiatives. But there are others that are deeply interested, such as the World Bank, for instance. So the challenge, as you well understand, for that IRC is how can we have all those organizations working together? And we are not sure yet we have the solution. We still need to develop the way it will be constructed together, and all views are certainly useful. But however, the proposed structure and governance we foresee so far is to have an executive committee. This executive committee would be with those partners that have made some sort of critical investment, both in kind or possibly through cash funding into the IRC. But we will also have an advisory board to make sure that all voices are heard, that we are not creating any problem with our research and innovation for human rights, for land rights, and so on, for food rights, but also that there is no innovations that goes in the wrong direction for, say, other environmental issues. So it is very important to have an advisory board and to rely on ethics and on rights. We certainly will have a scientific committee for the guidance of the initiative, and we will have a secretariat. So then we have working groups. Obviously, the working groups need to be first organized by pillar, so the 4 pillars already mentioned, however, with interactions across pillars, and in many times we will have working groups more specialized. For instance, if you want to work with machinery, obviously you want to have a working group that is dedicated to that activity. The same for plant breeding, the same for remote sensing in pillar 2, or for frontiers research if you want to work with this deep soil issues, for instance, maybe a working group. And for enabling environment and knowledge co-creation, especially, we would like to work with the regional networks. This is relevant for all pillars, but especially for bringing the knowledge back to the local people and co-designing that knowledge in a huge diversity of cultural contexts. So we can develop this a bit further by saying that, as mentioned by Nathalie Soos, we look forward to have a support for the Secretariat through a dedicated Horizon 2020 project. We hope this will be confirmed. We will then have the way to work together. We will have commitments from partners that will engage and therefore become part of the executive committee. And we will have the creation of the advisory board of the scientific committee, and we will initiate the working groups. So as already mentioned, with Pillar 1, this will be through the international calls with EJP Sol. In Pillars 2, we have collaboration across agencies internationally, so creating some international alignment and creating some calls for projects, really like engineering projects, putting things together to get some results, some products. Pillar 3, specialized public-private consortia on a range of issues. And Pillar 4, having knowledge platforms in local languages, trying to bring the knowledge back to the farmers and land managers through, say, mobile apps, so that everybody can use that knowledge and can contribute to co-creation. So that's really the vision we have of the structure and governance. And obviously, it is not because CIRCASA will end at the end of this month that we will stop our activity. We will carry on preparing the IRC. We will carry on developing a formal dialogue with potential partners, including the funders, developers, and users. And we will seek interests, but also develop use cases, customer stories, and have preliminary discussions on the level of commitment. We would like to see who can contribute through time. So this is in kind. Possibly also who would like to invest in that consortium for a specific initiative that they may be able to lead. And those kinds of commitments could be required to be part of the executive committee of the consortium. So having letters of interest to inform that the funding bodies, the research institutions, the company is willing to join the IRC collaborative effort will be the next step. So thank you for this, and I think we will have a few questions, I guess, a bit later. But back to you, Saskia.
Thank you very much, Jean-François, to explain us how everything is going to be organized. Then our next block is about a couple of statements of a range of stakeholders that have shown interest in the IRC. We have actually had many more interests of other stakeholders, but we just invited some of them to explain them why they think the IRC is needed. So the first one that I would like to invite is Dr. Laura Hoyer. She is the director of the BSAG Carbon Action in Finland.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the very interesting webinar and for the invitation. I'm very happy to give our support to this network. If we think of the key challenge to us, it is to develop a measurements and verification system to determine the amount of carbon stored in the soil, carbon sequestration, additionality, persistence, and carbon leakage should be determined scientifically. And how could we engage with this network to advance this research? I think we could do cooperation and co-creation, both in developing, measuring, reporting, and verification system, and in knowledge. As an example, our field observatory service illustrates the effects of carbon farming on Finnish farms and the development of an international carbon sequestration verification system. With this service, we want to present the current state of science and envision the future possibilities of carbon sequestration. Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Sorry to interrupt you. It was fine. Then thank you for your contribution. The next one is Dionys Forster, who is a sourcing specialist from the agricultural raw materials at Nestlé in Switzerland.
Hello, and thank you for the invitation to give a short input here. Let me say the following. 20 years ago, Nestlé initiated its Sustainable Agriculture Initiative. Healthy soils, biodiversity, and water in agriculture have been an integral part right from the beginning. A year later, in 2001, Nestle joined hands with Unilever and Danone and founded the Sustainable Agriculture Initiative platform with the purpose to seek alignment among the industry. Today, Nestle sources directly from more than 550,000 farmers globally. More than 400,000 farmers we train annually and on good agriculture practices, again, including on soil health, biodiversity, water use, and the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. In September 2019, Nestle has pledged to achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2050. Last December, we then detailed our strategy and announced investments of 1.2 billion Swiss francs to help spark regenerative agriculture across our supply chains by 2025. Where unavoidable, we aim to compensate greenhouse gas emissions through insetting mechanisms in collaboration with our suppliers and farmers. Regenerative agriculture is centered around universal principles that protect and restore natural resources. It aims to increase soil organic matter content, improve water flows, and foster biodiversity, resulting in carbon sequestration and storage in below and above ground biomass, increased soil fertility, and climate resilience. But processes in soils are complex and methods to assess GHG emissions incomplete, which makes trustful monitoring difficult. A standard for GHG measuring, reporting, and verifications is urgently needed for the sector transformation towards net zero. Nestle has a genuine interest in such a standard. Thus, the CIRCASA International Research Consortium would be highly welcome. If approved, Nestle would consider supporting the consortium by piloting of the innovations with suppliers and farmers. Thank you. And back to you.
Many thanks, Jonas. Now we continue with the next speaker, with Mr. Lee Nelson, who is from the Australian Centre of International Agricultural Research. Please have the floor.
No, I think you were mishandled.
Yeah,
it's
sorry.
Stefan.
It's first is Stefan Jirka, who is from who is an innovation manager in agriculture at Vera.
Yes, thank you.
Sorry,
thank you very much. No problem at all. No problem. Good morning, good evening to everyone. Thank you for the invitation. Yes, I'm working with Vera. We were established in 2007 to bring integrity, credibility, and scale to the emerging voluntary carbon market. And our Verified Carbon Standard, or VCS program, has now evolved into the world's leading greenhouse gas accounting and crediting program with over 1,600 registered projects in 70 countries, covering the range of energy, industrial, and land use activities. So in the last 12 to 18 months, we've taken a deep dive into the agricultural sector and have identified a primary challenge in our domain that it relates to the quantification of soil organic carbon stock change across temporal and spatial scales with sufficient rigor and cost efficiency to comply with our VCS program requirements and meet the needs of stakeholders seeking carbon offsets via the VCS program. So we are most interested to, I think, engage in pillars 2 and 3 of the CIRCASA network, IRC. A few ways that we can contribute to the process and to the learning. Firstly, we can share details on the VCS requirements for soil organic carbon projects, for example, around MRV or uncertainty assessment. We can contribute ideas on soil organic carbon research needs to advance concrete market actions, for example, the development of soil organic carbon performance benchmarks for baseline setting. And lastly, we'd be pleased to test the soil organic carbon research agenda and outcomes coming out of that in the carbon market setting, in other words, our VCS program. So again, we're very pleased to participate and look forward to engaging with this network. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Then now we are going to Mr. Lee Nelson. You're still muted.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Challenges for Australia. Well, soil carbon presents a number of opportunities as well as some significant challenges for mitigation in Australia, many of which are no doubt echoed in other countries around the world, but or that I think are worth highlighting for us are interest in soil carbon amongst policymakers is always good. And we see that increasing globally at the moment, and certainly in Australia. But science has an important role to play in ensuring that policies are realistic about what can be achieved. And we need to bring coordination and scientific rigor to assist the decisions of governments and a shared understanding of what is actually possible. Secondly, consideration of agricultural soils as a carbon sink must also consider the role of soils as an emitter of greenhouse gases. Whole farm systems accounting is important. Jean-Francois did mention that earlier when he was answering one of the questions, and we echo that. Thirdly, any action to increase soil carbon is an action to improve soil health. It is welcome and necessary for all sorts of reasons, environmental, social, and economic, as is the important recognition that sometimes there can be a trade-off between soil health and emissions. But I want to stress here that it is critical also to get the social and economic value proposition if we ever want to take up, particularly where there may not be the moral or legal obligation to do so. And finally, increasing average temperature and seasonal extremes is a challenge for Australia, as is the recognition that carbon content may decrease in some systems with global warming. Areas for collaboration. The Australian government has identified soil carbon as one of 5 priority technologies of long-term strategic importance to lower emissions, but this includes developing better emissions reduction methods to reduce the cost of measurement and improvements in the quantification of soil carbon in situ using advanced spectrometry in combination with remote sensing, satellite imagery, modeling and measurement. Lastly, Australia's National Soils Advocate was appointed by the Prime Minister to provide leadership on soil health. And this includes advocating on a global level to help address the challenges that I've mentioned above and others have mentioned, and also promoting Australia's expertise and capabilities in soil science and management. And we welcome engagement with the IRC as part of this collaboration. Thank you.
Many thanks. Then the next 2 speakers are not physically with us, or also not at this moment with us, better to say. But they have recorded a video for us. So the first one is Mr. Michael Ehmann. He's the CEO of Natais from France.
Hello, everyone. I would like to introduce, and we are a leading company. We are leader in our market, in the popcorn market, with microwave popcorn and bulk popcorn. We are controlling the whole process line from the seed up to the consumer unit. And we are working on regenerating farming practices with our farmers. Sustainability is a strategic pillar for Natais, and we put this strategic together in a package. The name is Naturellement Popcorn at Natais. So we work, since 2 years, we work together with INRAE and Sales Bio on a carbon footprint calculation method. And this method will enable us to help our farmers to find a better farming practices, to reward our farmers on these farming practices, and to measure objectively the impact of carbon in the soil and the quantity of carbon who is captured into the soil. It will also enable us to communicate with our customers and with our consumers to make sure that they are aware of these new practices and that we can create added value with these practices. Climate change is a global problem and we need global solutions. And I'm convinced that this consortium can help us to create international standards are recognized on the level of consumer, society, farmers, and help us to optimize farming practices. And to work together in this consortium will really enable us to generalize this approach and make it accessible for everybody and in all different countries. And I think it needs really a global approach and collaboration on an international level. So we started 2 years ago to work on this carbon footprint calculation method, and we have a concrete experience on it. We collected, together with Sales Bio, a lot of data. We are ready to share this data and this experience, and we are really looking forward to work together with you. And we think exchange of information and experience is crucial to go forward in this project, and we are excited about it. I'm convinced that with this initiative, we can build tomorrow's agriculture. I think we can bring together consumers and farmers. We can create a positive dynamic. We can involve and empower all players, and we can fight together climate change.
Okay, this was the first message. Then the second message is from Dr. Deborah Bossio. She's the lead soil scientist at the Nature Conservation Agency in the USA.
Greetings from the Nature Conservancy. All life depends, and to tackle climate change to benefit both people and nature. How we manage our agricultural systems over the coming decade is going to make all the difference as to whether or not we can achieve our ambitious goals to save biodiversity, to provide a climate-secure future, and to provide healthy food for all. Soil carbon storage has an important role to play in this story, and we're very encouraged at the attention that it's been getting from governments, from businesses, and from farmers. The Conservancy is an international environmental NGO working in countries around the world in farming systems ranging from silvopasture systems in Colombia, row crop systems in Brazil and Nebraska, smallholder farming systems in Kenya, and many more. And we're very excited about the opportunity to contribute to the efforts of this new research consortium, and also to take the learnings of the consortium back to the ground where we're implementing projects and programs with farmers and local communities. I urge that we implement the ambitious research agenda with all haste to keep pace with the action, and that we most importantly maintain a strong focus on the practical, answering the questions that those on the ground have who are trying to create success. Thank you so much for this opportunity to talk to you today.
Okay, well, this was the last of the commitment statements of stakeholders, of the non-academic stakeholders. Then we have 3 more statements of commitment of global initiatives. And I would like to give the word to Ronald Vargas, who is the Secretary of the Global Soil Partnership at FAO.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Well, this has been a very interesting event where we could see different angles, and I will just share what we are behind. Basically, we are promoting sustainable soil management, which for us is the key to achieve healthy soils. One important vehicle for that currently is soil organic carbon, not only because it's important in the soil system, but also because the opportunities has created on the market, in the demand, and also as a solution. Therefore, we are trying to go in this line, but our objective is healthy soils, sustainable soil management, because we cannot separate things. Now, currently, we really need to have a joint effort to recarbonize our global soils wherever is possible, because that's not everywhere, and we need to know the potential. There is a lot of interest on this process, and there is quite a lot, let's say, on investments to make. But we consider that this needs to be done in a balanced way, because we need to alert what is feasible and what is not feasible. In reality, there has been always a lot of, let's say, concern about the MRV. We have prepared an MRV and we are using it currently. But something very important, the ones who want to get carbon credits are always demanding that we have robust methodology, but at the same time, very cheap ones, because they don't want to invest on that. And I think that's a very important area that this research consortium can address. But again, we need to find a balance and compromise, because we cannot have the two at excellent level. Furthermore, when trying to monitor and work with countries in terms of land use practices, management practices, because that's exactly the key. We need to understand that our farmers are the only ones who can make a difference. And for that, they need to have all our technical support and financial incentives. And that also requires that we have good data, not only on soils, on measuring soils, but on the management practices. And that's something, a very weak point that we could see around the world. I believe a targeted research network like this will really provide benefits for all in terms of the real gaps that are everywhere where we are applying this great effort or carbon sequestration. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ronald. Then we move on to the next speaker, who is Mr. Hayden Montgomery, who is a special representative of the Global Research Alliance on Agricultural Greenhouse Gases. Please have the floor.
Thank you very much, and greetings to everybody. The Global Research Alliance brings together 64 countries working through 4 research groups, which are on that slide. Therefore, we have an interest in all of the 4 pillars of the proposed International Research Consortium. I guess it goes without saying that a coordinated research agenda allows resources and expertise from both the public and private sectors to be mobilized and aligned behind those research priorities. In this respect, and it's been mentioned before, the GRA is very pleased to be participating in the European Joint Programme on Soil in its first external call, which will allow for the participation of scientists from many of our member countries from Africa, Asia, and Latin America and Pacific. In terms of the GRA, what do we bring to the IRC? Well, we bring the national governments and their associated research institutions to the table, which means a direct link to the national greenhouse gas inventories and the nationally determined contributions processes under the Paris Agreement. And so the research agenda really needs to serve that policy need and that policy demand. As has been mentioned, there's an increasing demand from governments, from policymakers to include soil organic carbon more fully in the nationally determined contributions. And this, as others have mentioned, needs the development of lower cost, high quality soil organic carbon monitoring systems, which undoubtedly will be through some form of combination of models, remote sensing or proximal sensing. And these systems, as has just been mentioned by my colleague from Global Soils Partnership, need to capture management practices and the impacts of those practices on changes in soil organic carbon and other greenhouse gases, which is an ongoing challenge. I just want to stress the need for more field sampling of soils. While it is true we can now deploy artificial intelligence, machine learning, and a whole manner of different sensors to collect tons of very important information, we shouldn't overlook the need for more soil data to be collected in order for us to be able to develop, calibrate, and deploy these monitoring systems with some confidence. So look, I'm really happy with the Global Research Alliance's participation in CIRCASA, and we very much look forward to the next phase. Thank you.
Many thanks for your clear explanation about the Global Research the Global Research Alliance. And then our final statement of commitment is from Dr. Paul Lu, who is the Executive Secretary of the 4 Promille Initiative.
Hello to all of you. Thank you for giving me the floor. I am Paul Lu, the Executive Secretary of the 4 Promille International Initiative, promoting soil carbon sequestration and soil health to fight climate change and food insecurity. In 2018, the Scientific and Technical Committee of the 4 Promille Initiative defined the main orientation of an international research program on carbon sequestration by agriculture. The CIRCASA project, since its creation, has been inspired by this guideline and has been, de facto, the global scientific cooperation component of the 4 Promille Initiative. Today, by building the IRC on this solid foundation, this consortium will provide the coordination, cooperation, and scientific responses needed in the framework of our 4 Promille strategic plan by the partners and members of the initiative for their projects and achievement in the field. With nearly 560 partners and members, the 4 Promille Initiative is one of the leading international multi-stakeholder partnership for soil carbon sequestration with the triple objective of contributing to adaptation, mitigation, and food security. In return, RRC will benefit from privileged access to different categories of actors outside the scientific world, starting with farmers themselves, who are at the center of soil carbon sequestration. For all of these reasons, the 4 per mil initiative is actively supporting the creation of the ERRC, which, through these 4 important pillars, will be a critical component of the science contribution to global effort to combat climate change in terms of soil health and soil carbon sequestration. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Okay, many thanks, Paul. This was a very good overview of the contribution of the 4 per mil initiative. Then we have finalized this block of the commitments of the stakeholders. So we continue to our Q&A block of the conference. We have been monitoring all the questions that are in the chat, and we encourage you to ask more questions if you have any more. Also, comments or suggestions are very welcome. The questions that we will not be able to answer because there are many and we don't have that much time, even though because the speakers were very well in time with their presentations, we have some more time than we initially thought we would. So that is very nice. So we picked out the first question that we would like to ask is how grasslands should be included in our initiative, and how they possibly can be Jean-François, but can also be somebody else to answer this question. How they see the plateau of soil organic carbon sequestration in grasslands.
Thank you. Maybe I will start answering this one. Actually, I've been working myself on grasslands over many years as a researcher, and also on carbon cycle in grasslands. So I'm quite convinced that grasslands are a key component in that story, because first of all, they have approximately double the area of croplands. So they are certainly potentially contributing. They may contribute quite a lot. And secondly, because some of the grasslands are degraded and therefore could be restored with lots of co-benefits, both in terms of having carbon mitigation, but also having more stable production with climate variability, but also possibly increasing productivity. So I'm quite convinced about this. However, it's true that there are very contrasted conditions. For instance, in Europe, we may have many conditions where grasslands have already been improved and where we do not see what really could be done. It could be a possibility to reduce the stocking density, having less grazing animals, but then this is quite difficult unless you have alternatives to livestock breeding. And it is also true that we are, I think, a bit more advanced in terms of the MRV for croplands and for grasslands. It is quite complex to see how you can monitor continuously the carbon balance in grazing systems because of the recycling by the animals and, let's say, of the difficulties you may have in monitoring the vegetation activity. So that's a brief answer, but maybe others in the team could complement.
Any other people of the panel would like to add on to this? No. If not, then we continue to the next question. This next question was it popped up a couple of times in the comments in the chat. That was how to include social scientists and what we could expect from the social scientists to bring to this research consortium.
Yeah, here again, I will start it. I think this is extremely important. It is quite clear that unless we have economic approaches that can insert this soil carbon issue into the farm economics, into the supply chain economics, and have business models that are viable for farmers, industries. This cannot work. And this is very linked, in fact, to policy issues about carbon pricing and about the way you create standards, labels for having those carbon prices in agriculture. It is also then going back to policy issues. How are we going to have agricultural policies supporting this climate change issue, which is soil carbon? And when we think about what happens in many countries, we see that there are a few pioneers. So some farmers, for instance, that are pioneering the buildup of soil carbon, but often they do this on a sort of a voluntary basis. And we need to understand how experimentations can be done where they will be supported through supply chains and through research. So one thing that Kees Wehrman mentioned earlier in the meeting is about creating networks of living labs. So living labs are places where you have innovation, which is co-designed by scientists, by farmers, practitioners, and others. And this could be very helpful. Having lighthouse farms is also something that could be considered, so demonstration farms. But this is not only for farming, it could be for forestry, it could be for ecosystem conservation, and so on. So what I see as quite difficult is that this relatively new issue for social sciences is possibly not very attractive. So I think we actively need to explain that issue to our colleagues in social sciences and try to bring them in. And this could be done through our IRC, because we have a powerful network of universities, research organizations that have strengths in social sciences. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Maybe somebody else from the panel would like to also say something. Maybe Anna?
I would reiterate what Jean-Francois said, is that I think that we have so many good partners with various departments with a lot of experience on working on agri-environment measures, on working on behavioral change, on assessing costs and benefits, and that it's really about making sure that the agenda and the consortium governance brings in these perspectives from the start. And so that requires talking across disciplines and talking with colleagues who are not directly in your department. But I think that there's a lot of social scientists who work on soil management issues and economists who work on soil management issues, that it shouldn't be an issue to bring them in.
Okay. And what do you, in your view, would be the most important thing that they would bring to us?
Well, I think it's about understanding behavioral change. It's about assessing the effectiveness of different types of policy mixes. It's about understanding also how do you set up advisory systems with a view to making them as effective as possible. And it's also about bringing in the behavioral aspects from the piloting, from the designing phase through the living labs. So I think that this sort of behavioral perspective is very, very valuable.
Do you think that also then it will be easier to work with farmers? It will be more trustworthy. They will find us more trustworthy because of that.
Well, I think that ease of work with farmers doesn't necessarily depend on what science discipline you come from. That has really to do about how you set up the process of working with them. And social scientists, of course, can bring in a lot to this, and how you design the process, how you make sure that farmers' perspectives are on board from the beginning. There's a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience from that. So yeah, bringing social scientists in to reflect and to guide this process of engaging the farmers can be very, very valuable.
Okay, thank you very much. Before we continue with some more questions, we are now going to do a short poll again. So please put it on the screen. And we wait a little bit until everybody has filled it in. Yeah, while you're filling this in, I can also mention that somebody asked in the chat how to express interest to participate in this initiative. And they will be made available via the website of CIRCASA, a template for a letter for that. Also, all the presentations and also this recorded webinar will be available on the website. Het komt vanzelf. Okay, here it is. So we're happy to see that close to 90% of the people would like to participate in a working group or in a regional network. So thank you very much for this, for your input on that. Then we continue with the next question. We saw in the chat that there's some participants referring to already existing payment schemes. This includes action-based or result-based or hybrid systems of payment schemes. And they would like to know the view of our CIRCASA panelists, especially Pete Smith, on what he thinks can be realistically done. Or maybe Simon Kay, if he is still here with us.
Is Pete around? Yeah, here.
Yeah, I can start. I think it's really important to have a hybrid system. If you rely on something that's just activity-based, you don't know whether you've got a good connection between the activity and the change in soil carbon or the greenhouse gas emissions. So I think a hybrid system is ideal, where you can incentivize farmers to lock them in, maybe pay them on an annual basis, but lock them into a longer term contract, maybe at least 10 years. But then you could give them annual payments based on the projected change in soil carbon, which are then adjusted after a number of years when you get some soil measurements.
Okay, thank you. Maybe Simon Kay can also reflect on it. This question.
Yeah, thanks so much for the opportunity to answer on this one. I'm not sure we can give a really concrete answer. It's something we're looking at very closely. I mean, we definitely see that there are difficulties with the current system that we would have, if you like, that would basically be framed around how common agricultural policy relates with the interaction with farmers, because most of that is based on very much annual kind of payments. So it's quite difficult to build into the framework the longer term that one needs, plus also the monitoring, which can be pretty cumbersome, if not probably expensive, that it be needed. So we need to find a way to go from the very purely activity-based approach that you have for pretty much all the compliance aspects under the Common Agriculture Policy today, to something which is, let's say, going to be more in this certification realm that I mentioned on one of my slides. So we see that there's got to be some tuning development from different stakeholders. The initiatives by corporations like Nestle and so forth are obviously really key here, because they're going to leverage and help move this forward. But it's got to be quite all-encompassing, and I must add as well, it's got to show that it's very compatible with other types of mitigation, so that we don't just have something that is only focused on soil. There has to be a way of making sure that this is broader thinking in terms of just soil. So indeed, some of the stakeholders that I've seen mentioned today, that's quite a useful combination. Certification authorities experience, international looks very, very useful. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Maybe because, yeah, Dion is already raising his hand.
If I might just come in, it's Dionis Forster from Nestle again. So I think at the moment the discussion is really going on. Should it be more a result-based payment system, or should it be as what we had in the past, really on the practices? I believe very much it needs to be some combination. Also giving the nature of the time element that it is therein to build up healthy soils. I think practices can indicate, can be a proxy, and possibly payment can already start to some extent. But then at the end, yes, of course, it's what also is in the field, what's resulting there. And yeah, ultimately, it could lead to a change in the way how we are sourcing, right? I think if we want really to inset the carbon, we want to sequester. So possibly we need to have, we need to work together really with suppliers and farmers for quite some time to make sure that this is really visible at the farm level or in the soil level. Thank you.
Yeah, do you have any idea on when this may be available?
Well, I think we are working on this. I think it's not something that I think different industries are in parallel working on that. I think we would definitely see whether we can seek also alliance with other industry partners on these ideas that we now have. So yeah, I cannot make any promises on the time scale here, but it's definitely a topic, and it's of course it's debated quite a lot at the moment.
Yeah, I do see a bit of a possible role for our initiative to connect the different industries. Jean-François, did you want to say something?
No, I just would like to note that Nathalie Sauze would like to speak.
Yes.
Yes, thank you, Jean-François, Saskia. No, I would like to come back to this payment. Of course, we have a certain constraint linked to the budget circle, and that's also one of the difficulties when we are talking about, for example, agro-environmental measure. But when you have a look to the CAP in the past, we can see that there is a certain continuity for a certain number of measures. I'm thinking, for example, that all the conversion or the maintenance for organic production. So we can maintain a certain continuity despite the fact that for budgetary reasons, we have to review the program for the moment, every 7 years. But now there is a very important discussion for the eco schemes, and we are looking also what could be this question of so the length of the support is also part of the discussion. So that's important to be taken into account. But as mentioned, in financial support is only one of the elements what is needed for the farmers, and so we have seen that there is other needs for them. So, but we have to see, and the member states are at the center of these elements when they are building their strategic plan to see how they will incorporate such type of measures of support concerning the soil. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I actually would also like to ask Ronald Vargas to tell us a little bit how he sees this from outside of Europe or the developed country, so to say. If he's still here. If not, then we somebody else would like maybe to comment on the global aspect of this issue.
Maybe if I can say a word, because Ronald is not here, but he mentioned it very clearly. It's this issue of cost. When we look with smallholders in relatively poor countries, we need to find methods that provide this trade-off between, let's say, robustness, accuracy, but also cost. And I think this was well underlined by Ronald. So we will, this is a sort of big challenge, in fact, because although there are options, we will address certainly in the IRC to have some reasonable accuracy on big farms. It is possibly much more difficult on very small farms because of the huge variability in practices and so on. So this is something we need to further discuss, certainly also with the Global Soil Partnership.
Okay, thank you very much. Then another question that popped up a couple of times in our chat was, and it also relates a bit to the discussion that we just had, was whether we do actually have in our consortium all the right stakeholders, or that we should actively try to engage other stakeholders like retailers, for instance, to be on board in our consortium.
Yeah, maybe I started. It's not obvious because I think this will build upon expressions of interest. So why not have retailers if they have some good ideas on how to contribute? This is true. But remember that we are now addressing for the consortium soil carbon, not only agricultural soil carbon. And I think this is a big change. So we will need, compared to CIRCASA, to place far more efforts on those nature-based solutions, conserving carbon stocks where they are high, like in the peatlands, like in some of the forest soils, and other types of ecosystems, including the grazing lands, including the rangelands, and the wetlands. So this means that we need to be looking far more into the options to protect forests, to protect some of those peatlands that can be drained and cultivated, and this creates huge losses of organic carbon. And how to do this is quite critical, because we know that projections, because of the increase in food demand, quite often look into an increase in tropical deforestation. And so that brings us back to the, let's say, very big issues that were framed by the special report on climate change and land by the IPCC. And in this report, it was shown, and that's a work we had with Pete, with Smith, that soil carbon is one of the only options which comes with co-benefits for almost all land-based challenges, including food security, including water issues, and so on, and biodiversity. So if we want to address this, it will lead us to think more on what are the drivers of land use change, and how can we, in fact, alter those drivers to protect the soil carbon stocks in natural ecosystems, and with obviously very large co-benefits for environmental issues. So I think the scope for our IRC is broader, in fact, than food systems, although food systems will play a sort of a central role. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. What would you then also argue that we should not only pay for sequestering new carbon, but also for preserving the stocks that are there? And how do you see that?
Thank you, Saskia. Yes, I would think so. And let me also explain an issue that there is in the farming community. You see, there have been some farmers which since 20 years have started good practices for soils and have built up soil carbon. And now we come with payment schemes, and payments are based on increasing soil carbon stocks. So it's ironic that those people who made it, who really increase their soil carbon stocks, cannot be paid anymore just because the stocks are high. It is not logical, is it? So this is something that we are debating in the context of the French label on low carbon agriculture. And I think it will be finally open to those cases of the pioneers that have increased their stocks and just need to keep them high. So I think in the same way, you could have payments for people that for economic reasons would drain and cultivate peatlands, but they could be incentivized not to do so. And in this way, they would conserve their high carbon stocks. Let me also say that we are working actually within INRAE together with CIRAD on a project for the World Bank where we try to couple the greenhouse gas monitoring of deforestation and of livestock intensification. We have to see this as a system. There are many world regions where you have pioneer fronts which cause deforestation because of increased livestock in those regions. And unless we create some consistency on the way you could reduce those pioneer fronts by having more intensive livestock system on a smaller area, and how you could also limit the deforestation in this way, this needs to be assessed in a sort of systemic way. We will not do it on those land use changes. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I would actually really like one of the people from the European Commission also to tell us their view on this issue, on the whether or not how we are going to incentivize not to let our stocks of carbon go into the air.
So maybe I could start, because that's a little bit what we're already dealing with actually since the beginning of this year under the LULUCF legislation that we have in place. So maybe just to pick up on a point that Jean-François made about the difficulty of incentivizing, indeed, when there are already good management in the past has led to good carbon stocks, and the difficulty indeed of providing a performance-based system around the fact that it's not so easy to then increase those stocks further in those locations. And that's one of the, I think, key questions we have to look at. Then again, with respect to protecting those, so at the moment, the framework that we have, and it's basically that which I think could be reflected in any country, it's not just Europe, which is to place the carbon stock change, so the flux, into the accounting framework that goes against a national commitment, an NDC, a target, and to monitor how that is being improved or degraded. And from the degraded side, okay, then there is a protection element. The difficulty is how to link it between the national level and the actual activity and action. And this comes, I'm sorry to keep coming back to it, but it comes very much back down to the ability of the monitoring systems we have to be effective at not only awarding, if you like, or rewarding an individual actor for doing something right, but also identifying when there's an action taken that is perverse to the overall goal of increasing soil carbon. At the moment, it's member states in the commitment, the European commitment, who would take that responsibility, but they are relatively limited with respect to the information that they have available to tune these policies. So yes, we can have a system, but at the moment the granularity is quite limited, and I still think we are missing the high quality, very reliable, certain, accurate estimates that really help us to tune policy and then create the incentives at actor level, farmer level, farm holding level, that will really have to come into play in the next decades. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask if there is somebody else that would want to comment on this last issue. If not, then I would like to give the floor to Jean-François Susanna to say his final words for the conference.
So thank you very much, Saskia, and thank you very much, all of you, for your very active participation in this meeting. I think it has been quite fantastic to see the number of comments, questions, answers flowing into the discussion, and also to see, I think this is highly positive, the results of the poll. I was really surprised because we got support to not only work on soil carbon, but also large support for active participation into the pillars, into the regional networks, and also for participating in working groups. So I see that we have a sort of a bright future for this IRC because it attracts a lot of interest. It is timely, as was well said by the policy context statements, and it is really needed. We can see it is a large need to advance on those issues, and it is a need both for the public sector, for the private sector, and for the research. So it is striking also that we can make progress by attracting a critical mass and by understanding how to create interdisciplinary research. And this came into the discussion by showing the role of the social sciences, also by these considerations we just had on how to incentivize past soil carbon sequestration, if I may say, compared to current sequestration, which means that we certainly need to reward the conservation of the high carbon stocks. However, it is important that we would not focus exclusively on payments of soil carbon. I think having a sort of broader view of payments for ecosystem services, a broader view of the value of ecosystems, including their biodiversity, is something which would, in fact, bring to this issue more, I think, more logics. It is not only of having more efforts to store carbon in soils and reduce greenhouse gas balance, it is also having balanced ecosystem services and therefore having a sustainable land management that can bring this support to many of the SDGs and to many of the strategies of the European Green Deal. So I must say CIRCASA has been really, to me as coordinator, a fantastic project because we had an excellent team, and I would really like to acknowledge the efforts of all members of CIRCASA, and this is over the 5 continents really, and also the efforts of our, let's say, associate partners from the GRA, from the 4,000, from the GSP, from FACE JPI. I think we can be quite proud of what we could accomplish also in terms of making progress on some more or less critical issues for our understanding for the state of the art, and engaging with so many stakeholders in so many world regions. Obviously, the situation with the COVID-19 pandemics has slowed down our efforts, and we would really love to meet all of you and work together, in a presential meeting, but this has not been possible. So I think CIRCASA is really a good example of what can be achieved with international cooperation, and we will continue our efforts. We will now engage more precisely, step by step, on the construction of this IRC. And we are quite confident that we can have, even this year, some further advances. So what we will do is, first of all slides from this meeting are accessible. They will be posted on the website of CIRCASA. The recording of the meeting will be available. we will send to all people that have registered expressions of interest templates, so you can work with us also in this way. And we will carry on having some meetings with pillars, with working groups within pillars, and also initiating those regional nodes. So with those different efforts, we trust really that we will be on time for the launch of the IRC. And this will be, here again, we hope, supported by the European Commission for its secretariat. So indeed, this is not the final meeting, this is a final conference of our project. It is just the beginning of this IRC. And I would like to thank you all for your very active participation in this conference. Thank you and goodbye.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Schlag mir auf.